Hello, everybody. Welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to go through the planetary transits, or Gochara, as they're known as in Sanskrit, for April 2024. And this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. And it seemed like the overall theme for the month was the best of times, the worst of times. Excuse me, not that they will necessarily be the best. It's a little bit exaggerated here, but there's going to be a lot of duality. Um, and we'll talk about why. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, so if you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subjects are in my concepts playlist, so they can all be found there. And wherever you see adult asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. So since this is an interpretation video, I incorporate a lot of concepts. So this list of videos here may help you get more out of a talk like this. So the first is North, South, and East Indian style charts. That's the name of the video, but I do also cover Western style charts in that video. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. The Lugna, also known as the ascendant rising sign first house. Introduction to the constellations or rashis. Constellation or rashi categories. Planetary aspects, directional strength or bala. Natural, benefic, and malefic planets or grahas. Planet friends and enemies, graha, mitra, shatru. Planetary war or graha yuddha, planetary combustion or asta, planetary exaltation, debilitation, nicha, bhanga, nakshatras or lunar mansions, lunar and solar eclipses. We do have one this month, so if you want to, I won't get deep into that. I'm going to be doing a separate video, but if you'd like to learn about the general, the Vedic astrology perspective on, what is a lunar and solar eclipse, astronomical, the astronomy of that, and then what are the indications or significant meanings of it, and what potentially how to handle that energy, I would look at that video. I also have a whole playlist on each planet or graha, and I have a whole playlist on each house or bhava, so you can learn more about the planets and houses. And I also have a playlist on the yogas, also known as planetary combinations, and you'll see we have quite a few in the charts that I go through for this month. Okie doke. So let's go through the dates of when stuff is moving this month. And again, this is just for April. If you want kind of a video on the whole year, most of the year 2024, I would look at my winter solstice Uttarayana 2023 video. Because that's basically when I drew up a chart for winter solstice, that's essentially going to be from winter solstice 2023 to 2024. So again, that's more of a astrological year in many ways than our calendar year. But anyway, let's go through the dates for this month. So April 1st, Mercury went into retrograde or vakri. April 3rd, Venus, is that today? That's today. Venus moves into Uttara Bhadrapada nakshatra. April 4th, Sun crosses Rahu. So we should, tomorrow might be interesting. April 6th, Saturn enters Purva Bhadrapada nakshatra. April 8th, there's a solar eclipse or surya or grahan. It's going to be in Pisces or Meena, and that's going to be in Revati nakshatra. April 9th, Mercury re-enters Pisces since it's going retrograde. And that same day, we're going to start a planetary war or graha yuddha between Mars and Saturn, which will last until April 12th. April 10th, Mars enters Purva Bhadrapada nakshatra, so that's going to be in the middle of that planetary war. And then April 11th, also in the middle of that planetary war, Mercury will cross the Sun, and Mars will be in a mutual aspect of Ketu. So if you've been watching my last few videos, I've been talking about this Mars Ketu lineup aspecting business, and it's been fairly explosive, literally. So looks like this planetary war is going to be perhaps a bit tough, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, April 13th, Sun enters Aries or Mesha, um, a Rashi, a constellation, and at the same time it's entering Ashwini nakshatra. That same day, Venus enters Revati nakshatra. April 16th, Jupiter enters Kritika nakshatra. April 17th, Venus crosses Rahu. April 18th through 19th, we have another planetary war, so we have two this month. The second one's going to be Mercury and Venus in war with each other. April 22nd, Mars enters Pisces. April 23rd, we have a full moon in Libra Tula, and that's going to be in Swati Nakshatra. April 24th, Venus enters Aries and also Ashwini Nakshatra at the same time. April 25th, Mercury goes progressive. April 27th, Sun enters Bharani Nakshatra, and that same day, Mars enters Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. April 28th, Venus goes combust or asta. And then I just have a couple of early dates for May because I never know, when I get these videos done. These monthly videos take a bit of time. And I don't know when people are watching videos, but, heads up for May. May 1st, Jupiter enters Taurus. So that's a big deal because Jupiter's a slow moving planet. It takes about a year for Jupiter to go through a constellation. So that's going to be a big deal. And then a couple days later, May 3rd, Jupiter will go combust. So these last two lines here, as if April isn't going to be kind of wild in itself, if you know any of the astrology here. But then Venus and Jupiter are basically going to both be combust through May. So I just want to give you guys a heads up there because, again, I'm not doing Muhurta, but Muhurta is timing, auspicious timing, using astrology to find auspicious timing for stuff. And generally, when Venus is combust or Jupiter's combust, that's not generally a time in Vedic astrology where you want to start something auspicious, like maybe a travel to a new place or even go on pilgrimage or uh, get married, big life events, start a business. And they're both going to be combust at the same time through most of the month of May. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that in the beginning, even though we're talking about April. All right, so let's get into more of what this means and what it looks like. All right, so starting off, let's just look at the sky pattern, at the beginning of the month, April 1st, and the end of the month, April 30th. So on the left, we have April 1st here. This happens to be, you'll see that both of these charts, the rising sign in both of these charts is Aries or Mesha. And I did that on purpose because when you put the first constellation of Aries or Mesha in the first house, you will get what we call a natural zodiac. And the natural zodiac you can think of as sort of a birth chart for the whole world or all of humanity. So it's kind of a collective chart. Okay. So I have the times listed in case anybody's interested, but they're not really that relevant. So the April 1st chart is for 7:09 a.m. Eastern Standard Time because that's the time zone I live in. Again, these are both Aries, Lugna, or rising signs. The moon in the first chart here on the left, moon is in Mula. So that already tells you something. So Mula is a pretty intense nakshatra. The symbol of it is a bunch of roots tied together. And so you can kind of think, I kind of always think of seeds when I think of Mula. So when you plant a seed, there's a really huge transformation process and even like I would say difficult process of the seed, germinating underground, pushing through all that soil, and then hopefully, getting above the soil and blooming, developing into like a full plant, right? So, I mean, essentially the seed dies to itself to become a plant. And sometimes the seed doesn't make it. Sometimes the seed, it ends up whatever. Like if there's too much water, seed will end up, rotting under the soil, that sort of thing. So it's an arduous journey, essentially, when you're planting things, which farmers will be well aware of. And so the moon represents the emotional mind and the intuitive mind. It also represents the public. And you can see in this first chart, the moon is in the ninth house of authority of government. Father can be seen here, guru can be seen here, spiritual community can be seen here. And yeah, so I would see here like a lot of public unrest is how I would interpret this. And that's what we've been seeing. It was in the middle of me putting this together, some news flashed on my screen about, I guess in Israel, the biggest protest ever against the government and specifically about Netanyahu's actions and stuff like that. Um, are being protested. And so that's what we're seeing here. Like already from the moon, I haven't even talked about the rest of the chart, but already we're seeing public disapproval or contention with authority, government, that sort of thing. So the Jyotish sequence for this particular moment in time is Ketu, Saturn, Mercury, Mercury. So that also tells you something, because all these three planets, Ketu, Saturn, and Mercury, are all about separation. Ketu is like an explosive type of separation, like ending type energy typically. Saturn is like can be bureaucracy, difficulties, delays, anxiety, depression, skepticism. So distance because of time and space and kind of that sort of thing. And then Mercury can be separate because Mercury is the logical mind and the analytical mind. So sometimes if you find somebody who's very, super analytical, sometimes they're hard to connect with because they're not really coming from heart space, or like even if they're not really, there's so much energy in their head, they're not necessarily connected with their own body. So it's hard for other people to connect to them, in more physical ways or, emotional ways and stuff like that. So there's a lot of distance here in the beginning. Okay, so Mercury and Jupiter both have bala, so directional strength, since they're both in the first house. So that gives them strength, Mercury and Jupiter. The other thing about Mercury and Jupiter in the first house, they're both education planets. They're both speech and writing planets, communication planets, and they're also social media planets. So again, now if you combine that with that moon and Mula, that's where I got this like news, literally news with this kind of Mercury Jupiter combination about public discrepancy with the government. So you can see how that got up. Okay. Saturn and Mars also of note in this chart. So to add, kind of more fuel to the fire here, Saturn and Mars are in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and societies. And you can see Saturn is super strong because it's in its own house. And you can see that, again, these planets, true planets, are only a few degrees away. And next week, or in about 10 days, yeah, about 10 days or so, or no, 10 days from the beginning of the month, it's probably about a week now from when I'm recording. But we're gonna have a war between Saturn and Mars, and that's not gonna be pretty, because of the other things that are going on, like Mars is shifting nakshatras and stuff like that. So anyway, you could see here Mars being a planet, a fiery planet that's about innovation, and it's a little bit erratic and stuff like that. It's kind of like throwing fire or some kind of, chink in the armor of this really strong Saturn. And Saturn, again, especially this way, can be bureaucracy. It can also be like fixed ideas. So there's some attempt here to transform the fixed ideas in public spaces, public conversations, and that's what we're seeing. Um, and then you don't see it right now because even though Mercury goes retrograde on the first at 7 o'clock in the morning, it was not technically retrograde, but essentially Mercury's retrograde. You can think of Mercury retrograde in this chart. So that's going to be all about like, reviewing, thinking, rethinking, revising things. And so that's, again, like that news flash I got about protests going on in Israel. That's essentially the energy of this chart. Okay. The other thing to note, so for especially people who are ruled by Mars or have a very strong Mars in their chart, you can see Saturn with Mars here, but Saturn is also aspecting the first house of Aries, which is ruled by Mars. And Saturn is also aspecting Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. So we have Saturn, this massive Saturn of fixed ideas, delays, obstacles, on both the constellations ruled by Mars as well as the Lugnatia or the ruling planet Mars. So that's going to really hold back actions in a lot of ways. And again, when we get into this war situation between these two planets, it's like grinding, it's like grinding the wheels grinding forward, trying to get them to turn in a different direction. Okay. So, what else here? Yeah, you can see Mars aspecting the second house of oral speech. So again, more protesting going on here. Moon and Mula aspecting the third house of written communication. So both oral and written dissent. In the fifth house here, we have Jupiter aspecting as well as a Saturn Mars. So it's like, how do we bring justice to this bureaucratic, knot? And how do we, how's our leadership doing there? Well, you can see the fifth house lord is Sun, and Sun's gone into the 12th house of losses and expenditure. So, again, what are our authorities, governments doing? Are they serving us or are they creating more losses, especially overseas? Because the 12th house can be like, long distance overseas, foreign places. Then the sixth house here, we've got K2. So without knowing anything else, and K2 is in Hasta Nakshatra currently. So Hasta is all symbolized by hand. So even though K2 is all about separation, with the hand here, this could be literally, you know, um, it can be a grabby, it can be a grabby type of nakshatra. So this is like grabbing what you can or releasing what you can very quickly. And we have, what is it? Mars, Sun, and Venus here. Venus is debilitated in Virgo. So this is going to be like, and with Sun and Mars there, those are the two fire planets. They're also the two leadership planets. Sun represents like president or king, typically, and Mars represents like CEO or commander in chief. So those two together, when you get those together, this could be like, wayward military operations, that's bringing destruction to human lives. That's essentially what the protest in Israel is going on is about right now. So, and the sixth house is also a house of enemies. So we have a debilitated Venus there, so not a lot of compassion. K2 is explosive. Sun and Mars again, military. I mean, that's like the wild woolly west, in terms of um, enemies and the attempt to contain them. It's not going well, as per the public perception here. And then we have this Mercury, Jupiter in the seventh house. So the effort here, the business here is about again educating, speaking, writing, getting awareness about this and trying to create some sort of I think cohesive effort, in terms of a protest to the way authorities are dealing with things. Um, then the Saturn here is aspecting the eighth house of deep psychology, which I mentioned again is also aspecting, since it's aspecting the eighth house ruled by Scorpio, and Scorpio is ruled by Mars. There's going to be delays in changing this deep psychology, um, of what's prevalent or kind of set. Seems like may seem like it's set in stone currently. The ninth house we talked about. The 10th house is ruled by Saturn. So again, this massive ideology, fixed ideology, is what's kind of note, and kind of the important conversations people are having. The 10th house represents career. It also represents like daily activities when the sun's out. And you can see that this 10th house is going to get rocked, once Mars and Saturn, go head to head this week. And then you can see the 12th house here. You have Rahu, Sun, Venus. Um, so Rahu is about ambition, overseas, and Sun is government, authority, leadership, and Venus. Um, Venus is, exalted here. So again, and Rahu, are all of them in? Rahu's in Revati. Sun, I don't know if Sun is in Revati Nakshatra or not. And Venus is in Purva Bhadrapada. So you can see there's like an ambition here to save lives, right? This Mercury Jupiter situation in the first house, the education and the communication, writing, written or oral, is all about like how do we our ambition turn towards getting government or authorities to be more protective of human life rather than so much collateral damage, which I don't know, at least, I don't follow things too closely in the news. I just kind of catch headlines mostly, but, it seems like, oops, we dropped an extra bomb, and, hurt, innocent people again, that keeps coming up. And there's always collateral damage, right? But maybe more so now than other times, who knows? So anyway, that's the beginning of the month. Then the end of the month, things are heating up, like maybe literally even. So the second chart's April 30th, 5:15 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, Aries Lugna. Now the moon has gone from Mula, so this like, planting seeds, arduous journey type energy to Uttarashada. So this is a piercing, powerful victory. And you could see it's in the 10th house. So there's going to be some public victory. And I don't know if it's by the public or for the public or on, getting the public together, which, I mean, in terms of like influencing the public, it might be influencing the public. And we'll see why as we go through this more. So then the Dasha period for this moment in time is different now. Now we've got Sun, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. Now, if you look at the first house, Sun, Jupiter, Venus are all in the top, in the first house, the ascendant here. And the thing is that Sun is strong, it's exalted. So that's a very powerful government. Jupiter and Venus are the two kind of compassion, kind of humanitarian planets. The thing though is Jupiter is in the last degree at Sunday, so it's weak and it's about to, as I mentioned, the next day go into Taurus. So we're going to lose Jupiter. Or at least Jupiter's going to go to the second house where there might be some announcement of like, oh, we've done this and now we're more humane in our practices, like we're a more humane government type thing. But you can see Jupiter switching into Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is combust. So there might be a quick announcement, but then it's going to get pretty quiet because both Jupiter in Taurus and then the ruling planet of Taurus are both going to be combust. It's going to be like, I don't know, it kind of seems like an empty hole of information. Although, and then the thing is, there might be like a strange or unusual kind of announcements coming through, like because we also have K2 aspecting Taurus as well for a while. Actually, for quite a bit of April. And the reason why we're getting a K2 aspect here is because Mercury is aspecting the sign that K2 is in, and as Mercury rules Virgo, which K2 is in. So we're going to have a lot of, I don't know, strange things coming through in terms of communication, it looks like. Yeah, so, and again, I mentioned, first off, when I was just going through the dates, I mean, Venus and Jupiter combust. That May be a really tough month. I mean, not to jump into May, we're talking about April here, but just to know, um, at least in the States, like it was a couple summers ago, just when Venus was combust, we had this big thing with Black Lives Matters, and that's it's totally I'm down with the cause and all that, but the way that it was expressed was literally people were burning things, burning cars in the street and looting businesses and like literally towns, cities had to like kind of put all the people who are that kind of militant and angry sort of in one spot just to contain the mess. Um, so again, not that like the message wasn't a good one, but the way they were expressing it was very violent. It wasn't very diplomatic. It was just very fiery. And now, not only do we have Venus combos, but we're going to have Jupiter combos. So May, again, I haven't gotten into details of May, but already that's enough for me to know that may be pretty dicey. Just even in like, small ways, if we're talking about, day-to-day lives for, I don't know, I guess a lot of us, like, I typically notice when Venus goes combust, customer service usually gets pretty bad. Like if you go to a store to return something, like the person you're talking to is very angry instead of just sort of, nice and polite. So that's like a small scale version of what's going on here. So, also, I've done some charts on people who have a Venus combust. Um, and a lot of times they're people who don't express a lot of sociability, like they might even be autistic and stuff like that. So you can see again with the Venus and Jupiter being combust at the end of the month, things might be kind of tough. The other thing is that you can see slowly over time through the month, we're going to get a more and more, we're moving from like a Saturn dominated chart to more of a Jupiter dominated chart. And that's also part of why I said on the very first slide, the best of times and worst of times, because like one, things are shifting pretty dramatically with the planets. But the other thing is that as these planets go through Jupiter signs, or they're aspected by Jupiter, Jupiter is a dual planet. And so you're going to have, even more so good stuff coming through, bad stuff coming through. And again, I don't usually like to use good and bad, but those are the words most people use. But things that, usually things that most people find desirable and other things that people don't find desirable, they're both going to be coming through here. And so there's going to be like two stories. There's going to be like two versions or two stories to everything that happens. So it's going to be like almost a double up on everything that happens here. And there's probably going to be, the more positive version and the negative version as well. So just be aware of that. The other thing that's going on, so again, we're going from more education and kind of, protesting in the beginning here, more verbal. But you can see it's firing up because we also have a parivartana between Jupiter and Mars here. So that means Mars is going to be, swa in its own sign in the lugna here. So we have an exalted sun and a swa Mars, both fire planets, both like, in a fire sign with this sweet little Venus combust here. I mean, this can be like a lot of military action. And especially with Jupiter and Venus being combust, there's no compassion or diplomacy, like softening the blow here. So, yeah. So despite, I think, the efforts of the public to, you know, um, cool things off or, ratchet things down to a more humane level, I don't know that that's actually what's going to happen here. Yeah, unfortunately. So, and then also with Mars, you can kind of almost think of now Sun, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and the Lugna here. When you get Jupiter and Mars together, that can be all about law. Jupiter and Mars together, even if it's not law, it's about enthusiasm. So we've got this like fiery sun, this, this swa, fiery Mars and Jupiter. I mean, this is going to be like super explosive energy here. Just like, and because it's in the first house, we're talking physical energy, mental energy, psychological energy. This is somebody who's like, just literally on fire, like can't settle down, potentially a hothead. Again, Jupiter and Venus aren't there to rein things in. Um, so especially towards the end of the month, that Jupiter and Venus, since they're internal, I mean, they're essentially eclipsed because they're combust. can't see them since they're so close to the sun. That kind of compassion, diplomacy, and that sort of stuff, you have to find them within yourself, essentially, because you may not see them in the external world. But again, Sun and Mars and the Lugna here, both super strong. That's government military stuff. And then Mercury is debilitated in the 12th house, so that's, communication that's gone wayward. There's a Rahu there, so there's still ambition, but you have Mars and Jupiter there now. So now it seems like there's going to be more forceful measures, actually, in terms of law and justice, containing enemies, because you have Mercury, at least aspecting Virgo, so it's going to try to contain uh, the 6th house of enemies, but Mercury's debilitated, so how much is, it's sort of like rational thought is out the window, and with Rahu and Mars, I mean, that can be really erratic, ambitious energy. And then Jupiter there, that will help mitigate some losses, but with Jupiter in the 12th house, even though it's Swa, you will get potentially protection of inanimate things, but not necessarily people. And Jupiter represents people. So, you know, yeah. Let me just go through the rest of the chart. So I talked about the first house, second house I talked about. Mars is aspecting the third house of written communication. So, that can be kind of like a military or government override of written communication. I would even say the media, essentially. I mean, not to be too conspiracy theorist about it, but yeah, that could be. And then the fourth house, we're gonna have Moon aspecting, um, its own house. So potentially there's some settlement here, but the thing is that with Mars and the Lugna with the parivartana, you're gonna have Mars debilitated um, in Moon. So even if the public is sort of contained in a way, Mars is going to be, this fiery energy is going to is firing up the public, and also, the fourth house is happiness and homes. So yeah, so it sort of seems like it might be okay, but then you can definitely see disruptions there. The fifth house, you have Jupiter and Saturn. And because Jupiter is Sunday and shifting signs, you're going to have this massive Saturn basically dominating the fifth house of intellect and decision making, counseling. Sixth house, I mentioned, you have that Mars aspecting, you're going to have Jupiter aspecting. So again, law, K2, blowing up the law, Mercury, trying to contain things. So again, there's like this massive effort to contain enemies through legal jurisdictions and things like that. But Mars and K2 together, that's a very explosive type of energy. So I don't think it's going to happen in a particularly peaceful way. Um, and let's see, the seventh house, we've got Sun, Jupiter, Venus, Mars. So basically, the seventh house of independent business and really personal relationships and business relationships. It's basically reflecting the first house, which is very fiery in nature. And then the eighth house here, we have Jupiter, we have Mars, we have Saturn. So, um, yeah, I think it's this kind of there's going to be more strength here in the eighth house at the end of the month than the first half of the month. The first half of the month again is looking more dovish, and the second part of the month is looking more hawkish. So, I think for people who are fired up and or just have followed philosophy of might is right and the ends justify the means and all this, they're going to be happier at the end of the month. It looks like. Um, there is going to be some strength in the government authorities as well, to some extent. The ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter's aspecting that house. But the thing is, Jupiter again is Sunday. It's in the last degree of the sun. It makes it unstable, and it's shifting signs, and it's combust. So Jupiter is, as a planet, is going to be quite unstable at the end of the month, and that means that governments are going to be quite unstable at the end of the month as well. Authorities in general, even if it's not like on a global level, even like bosses, authorities in your life, you'll probably see some fighting words, fighting actions coming through at the end of the month. Moon, we already talked about in the 10th house. Saturn, we already talked about in the 11th house. So again, there's more fixed ideas in social circles. And then, again, plenty of losses here in the 12th house. Rational mind, actions, ambition, people. So again, it's coming to a fray, I would say, towards the end of the month. All right, so let's go through planet by planet. We'll follow them through their journey through the month and see how that lands. So April 1st, Mercury went retrograde or vakri. So whenever it goes retrograde, it does gain strength in Vedic astrology. It gets stronger, but part of what happens when it gets stronger is that you're going to get more detail-oriented, potentially more interested in clearing, cleansing, reviewing, revising, that sort of thing. Travel can go off. I find in my own life I tend to do things twice, if not more times, because again, I'm like reviewing things and my decisions and the details and stuff like that. So that just happened. April 9th, Mercury re-enters Pisces or Mina Revati. So, yeah, so Mercury goes back into Pisces where it's debilitated. And Pisces is a water sign, so it's an emotional thing. So it's kind of, again, like trying to process emotions. Luckily, though, Mercury was just in Pisces, which probably brought some things to a head. But the second time Mercury goes into Pisces, Venus is going to be there, where Venus is exalted. So it's going to make this Mercury debilitation bhanga. It's going to smooth out some of that debilitation. So going through, sorting through emotions will have more compassion, a compassionate aspect to it in April. The other thing is that when Mercury goes back into Pisces, great K2 is now going to aspect 5 and 9 away to Taurus and Capricorn. So it's going to make things more unstable. And again, K2 is in an Earth sign and Taurus and Capricorn Earth sign. So again, it's just physical things in life, the tangible things in life are going to be more stable. And again, there's this potential sorting energy of, do we keep it or do we let it go? It's going to be a more active process, and it might be a more um, um, chaotic process with this K2. Yeah. The other thing is that with Venus being there, one of the things that might be you might be going through is like things like clothes, artwork, friends, vehicles, that sort of thing, because those are things that Venus represents. Then Mercury crosses Sun on April 11th. So again, Mercury's debilitated, but Sun is there. Venus is going to be there. The Sun represents, again, like career, boss, that sort of thing. Mercury represents like colleagues, business. So this could be like a amicable but awkward discussion with a boss or colleague, that sort of thing. Because Venus is exalted here, so Venus is involved here since it's also in Pisces. You'll have like a softer edge to this conversation. Um, again, it's well-meaning, but there's still going to be, I think, some awkwardness about the conversation. Then 18th through 19th of April, Mercury and Venus are in planetary war. So Mercury is, the head, and Venus is the heart. So there's a head versus heart decision here, or kind of internal conflict, if not external conflict. But since Venus is exalted in Pisces, And Venus typically wins most planetary wars because it's the brightest star, or brightest planet in the sky. So yeah, I mean, I think that heart will win out, but there's going to be a mashup here. You can think of it also as thoughts versus feelings. That's Mercury, that's Venus, or business versus love. Those are the things that are going to be on the table. But again, I'm not too worried about this one. It might make things a little bit awkward, but again, because Venus is so strong, it's going to take the edge off of this. It's not like the Saturn Mars war that's probably going to be could potentially be quite nasty. Um, April 25th, Mercury goes progressive, so we're going to start moving back through Pisces, kind of finish up that cycle, start a whole new cycle with Mercury. Mercury won't be back to Pisces for about a year. Um, once it enters Aries again. But this is going to be with like more clarity moving forward and more forward progression. The thing though is that Mercury gets pretty close to Rahu before it goes progressive. It's actually within 1 degree of Rahu. So especially, the end of the month, like I already mentioned, the end of the month is going to be, quite a bit different from the beginning. This could mean like strange conversations, words that are had. Could be foreign travel. Could be like mm, conversations that are had. So yeah, even though Mercury doesn't cross Rahu again, it's within 1 degree. So there's going to be quite a bit of Rahu influence on Mercury. So decision making is going to be a bit, you know, erratic, I would say, because of Rahu and because Mercury's debilitated. Um, Conversations, decisions, planning, it's going to get worse, at the end of the month here for Mercury. The other thing is that Mercury is going to be conjoined with Mars. So that's where, again, like all of a sudden, with Mercury swimming in the sea of like exalted Venus, very lovey-dovey, all of a sudden towards the end of the month, that can make it kind of bring a sudden turn towards something more, well, exciting maybe, but I think even more than exciting, I mean, potentially, erratic or maybe even violent, that sort of thing. So again, this is a shift, because again, Mercury is with Jupiter right now, so justice and fairness in conversations. And then we're going to get to emotional thoughts and action, thoughts and feelings, even though there's a war. And then you can see Mercury's going to be uh, moving into a more action oriented, but also like um, again, violent, erratic, pattern towards the end of the month. The other thing with Rahu, with Mercury being with Rahu and Mars, you can get obsessive thoughts, actions, and ambitions here. The other thing, you could get like a computer virus, actually, because Mercury and Mars together, you typically get things like technology, like especially computers, and Rahu, you can get technology as well. But Rahu can symbolize things like a virus, so this could even be potentially like a cyber attack. So yeah, look out for that. Okay, so if you've watched any of my monthly videos, I like to include some charts to look at so we can look at some of these energies as more embodied rather than just abstract. So this is the first chart I pulled up, which initially doesn't look at all like the current sky pattern, but we'll talk about it. So this is the chart of Niccolo Paganini, violin virtuoso, Italian guy. He was born on 27th October 1782. The time that's given for his birth was 10:30 p.m. But it's not verified, so who knows if this is true. And he was born in Genoa, Italy. So, because we're not sure if this is an exact birth time, I decided to look at his sun sign, his sun chart, to get more information about him. So, this is not his Udaya Lagna, it's a Surya Lagna, so a sun rising chart. The sun nakshatra is in Swati, Swati is symbolized by newborn grass blowing in the wind. So there's this kind of like fragile energy associated with this nakshatra. And you can see that the sun, right here in the first house, is debilitated. Sun represents, the career, which for him was not necessarily. He was famous for his career. So, but we'll see. But it also represents health. And for him, what is true is that his health had always been fragile. Like he often canceled events, concerts, and stuff like that because of his health, whether physical or mental. The moon is in the nakshatra of Punarvasu. So, again, we don't have an exact birth time. The moon, at least during this day, was in Gemini all day. And at 10:30 in the morning, that's about when moon was shifting from Ardra nakshatra to Punarvasu. I think either one potentially could have worked for him. So, but most of the day it was in Punarvasu. So, I just left it as Punarvasu question mark. I think Punarvasu also potentially works because the symbol for Punarvasu is a quiver of arrows. So if you can think about like a box with a bunch of arrows that usually you carry on your side or on your back, and then you reach back and you grab an arrow and then you shoot it with your bow. Um, that's not too different from the bow that he would use as a violinist. Right. It's like you have your box with your violin and your bow, and then you take it out and you play it and you put it back and you take it out. And how many times did he do that in his life, right? So, and you can also see that the moon aspects of the third house of physical dexterity. So, yeah, and classic arts. So, let's see. The other thing is Punarvasu represents things that are pointed, very sharp, traveling, but like a return to home, which are things that basically were his life, essentially. The Day Lord is the sun, so again, leadership energy, even though it's debilitated. And the Hora Lord, again, we don't know if this is the right hour, but if it is the right hour, then it's the moon. So we're looking at leadership and creativity, which he offered both of those. Birth to Shah was Jupiter. So he's born into Jupiter, and you can see that Jupiter is in his third house of, again, classic arts and physical dexterity. So, and then he went from Jupiter to Saturn. So his first two dashas were all about the third house, which, if you saw, was it last month I did Mozart or the month before? Mozart had, a bunch of planets in the third house that he started running from the beginning, and both of these guys were virtuosos from a young age. So basically, as soon as they, can pick up an instrument, they're masters of it. Um, so let's see. So Jupiter will bring things like publication of musical works, potentially for him, and also communication. So again, for him, communication was more, I think it was very physical because people used to watch his playing, um, but more so than like his oral speech and stuff like that. So the Shah sequence for him, he started off in Jupiter, went to Saturn, went to Mercury, and then he ended up passing away in Ketu. And you can see like Jupiter and Saturn were here in the third house when things were really like, blowing up for him in his career. But Saturn also aspects the 12th house. And you can see there's a parivartana between Mercury and Mars. So you can think of it as both Mercury and Mars in the 12th house of foreign places, but also places of isolation and also losses. So you can see Saturn aspects the 12th house, Mercury is in the 12th house, Ketu is in the 12th house. So even from this bit alone, you can see that as time goes on, there's going to be he's going to accumulate a lot more losses in his life. And when he actually started his K2 period is when he ended his world tours. So he just stopped, the traveling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So let's just go through and see what we see. Again, is it an exact birth chart? No, but I think it works pretty well for him. It's like some kind of chart to give us some information about him. So he's starting at the top here. He's again Surya Lagna. He's a Libra Tula, movable air sign for his sun. So it's going to be like movable air, a lot of ideas churning. Um, and so things that would affect his health and also his career. The sun's debilitated, it's in Swati. So again, the sun is not strong here. It's actually quite challenged and sensitive and fragile, which are things that he brought to his music. So he's a fragile, sensitive person, but had a lot of health issues throughout his life. And he's not somebody who's going to be in a steady administrative type. He's going to be the opposite. So he was known for his erratic behavior and gambling and womanizing and things like that. So he was pretty wild, in a lot of ways, as was demonstrated by his music. So, um, but there's still like some level of like nobility. He's still a master or leader of some kind, even if he may not be the best role model necessarily, but musically was for many people, right? So the son, though, because it's debilitated, it's sort of like, was he more of a noble type or was he more of a notorious type? And so I think he was a bit of both, actually. Professionally, maybe more noble. Personally, perhaps more notorious. Okay, so his Lagnatia, his ruling planet is Venus. Venus is in the 12th house of, again, losses, expenditures, and it's debilitated here. Um, so there could be a lot of losses related to his art as well as, well, women. Venus represents women. And Venus is in Chitra, so there's this Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone. So I think he was like, and Venus can also symbolize like the finer things of life. So he might have had like shiny object syndrome, like wanted like this extravagant lifestyle, which I think he did. But because he wanted that and tried to maintain it and achieve it, like he ended up gambling a lot, and losing a lot that way. Um, there's also, you can see here, he in his chart has almost two planetary wars, which is what we're experiencing this month. So you might start seeing that there's some similarities between his chart, even though initially it doesn't look like it. You'll start seeing that there are more similarities in his chart than not. At least you can see Rahu and Ketu are in the Pisces Virgo, as it's similar, and you have a Mars Ketu line up in Virgo, which will be similar once which is currently true in a way because Mars is aspecting Ketu in Virgo, and then you're going to have a direct mutual aspect when Mars goes to Pisces. So there are similarities you can see. Mars and Ketu are both in Hasta, so again, symbolized by hand. So this is all about being grabby and doing it in like rather erratic ways. Um, trying to gain the finer things of life. But again, with Venus, Mars, K2 here, Venus being debilitated, Mercury also you can think of there because of the parivartana exchange of houses between Mars and Mercury. There's going to be a lot of loss through various means. Some protection of the losses, probably because of his talent. Also, probably because looks like with Mercury and Mars in his second house of oral speech and Mercury being in Anuradha nakshatra. Anuradha is all about building bridges. He's probably, he's quite the seducer, like not just of women, but probably a lot of people. Like probably had very was good with his words and stuff. Sometimes though, when you get Mercury and Mars together, you can also get like a liar's combination because Mars can be like a thief and Mercury can be like the analytical, logical mind. So it's kind of like thief of thoughts. So, which is essentially what lying is, right? You rob somebody of their of the truth. So, mm. So he was probably quite the talker. But I think that might have acquired him more opportunities. But then if he blew it, then then it's going to affect his reputation over the long haul, right? So, um, yeah. So, but you can see also with these planets, Saturn, he ran Saturn, Mercury, K2 all in the 12th house. That's why he did so much foreign touring, and he was really quite successful with that. Um, but loss of through partners, sexual escapades here, drug use, and part of the drug use was actually because of his health. Like some of the remedies that time given to him were, sorry, just hiccups. Let me see if I can get rid of them. Mm. Mercury and opium. I mean, so, and then he had syphilis was at least one of the diseases that he had. So, that affects the mind. So between the, the disease and the potential cures, he got sicker and sicker, especially his nervous system, and his mind, and the logical mind. So, yeah, and I could see like over time that he would lose physical and neurological function with this kind of chart. The second house, again, the second lord is Mars. Mercury is on rod. I kind of talked about this. So, um, despite being fairly unstable in his body and his mind, he was able to gain support. So he had sort of seductive speech or attractive speech, maybe. Seductive might be a little bit strong, but in some cases, I think that was very true for him. The third house lord is a swa, so Jupiter in its own house in Mula. Saturn is also there in Mula, and you can see they're in planetary war as well. So he's got two planetary wars going on. And this house is also aspected by the moon and aspected by Mars. So when you get Jupiter and moon together, or aspecting each other, you get a necessary yoga, planetary combination, which, is a lot of travel potentially. Saturn and Mars together, like athleticism, a lot of activity. There's like initiation of activity and endurance of activity. Um, Jupiter and Mars together, a lot of enthusiasm. Jupiter and Saturn being in Mula, I already talked about Mula a little bit in the beginning, with the monthly chart, but again, the kind of music that he does, it's going to be very physical, um, very lively. And then this Jupiter, this Mula energy is like this tension of like deep, dark, transformative, like is it, like on, being on this edge of your seat, like is this gonna, how is this gonna end, like enthralling type energy. Um, with the moon, again, being in Punarvasi, like going back and forth and then going back to your box type energy, like, he was just mesmerizing people essentially, with his ability to play. Um, and again, the third house represents things like manual dexterity. It also represents things like cognitive function, which again, since both Jupiter and Saturn and Mula over time, that's what can be lost for him is the ability to play, and then also the cognitive function to be able to play, um, potentially. The other thing here, now we move to the fourth house. The fourth house lord is this Saturn in Mula. And the thing is that it was postulated, I don't know if it was proved, but it's postulated that he actually had a genetic disease, possibly something like Marfan syndrome, possibly, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Either one of those, they're basically a connective tissue disorder in which um, the structures don't build in normal ways, and so there can be, um, like, apparently his finger span was, abnormally long. And so because his hands or his fingers or both were so long, he could do all these like acrobatics on his, violin, and he also played guitar. Um, and it was just sort of like more this, bizarre or unique physical ability because, that he essentially capitalized on, that allowed him to do these things that other people couldn't do with a violin. Like it was literally because of potentially a genetic disease. So even from that, uh, from the beginning, even potentially he had a genetic, or diseases he was dealing with throughout his life. And then the fifth house here is aspected by Mars and Saturn. So again, intellect was both imaginative and all about movement, like creation and stuff like that. So, and it was an Aquarius, a fixed air sign, so a lot of ideas flowing through, like what do they call it? Idea flow, or idea turnover, that sort of thing. So that's where all of his not just playing came from, but he was a composer as well. If you combine the third house with the fifth house, the other thing about the fifth house is all about creativity, and the fifth house is kind of like a natural stage. So this is where all of his, part of his performances came from. The sixth house here, we have the Lord is Jupiter. So again, some of his creative endeavors. Rahu's in Uttar Bhadrapada, so there's an ambition here. Sixth house is about enemies. It's also about financing, like loans and stuff like that. So I think he was always probably drawing out a lot of money. But it's aspected here by Mercury, Venus, Mars from the 12th house of losses. Um, so he might have been seeking a lot of loans to fund his lifestyle, but again, I think they result in a lot of losses. Seventh house here. Now, this is again where we're seeing that even though initially his chart doesn't look that similar to what we're currently seeing in the sky, we have Sun aspecting here from Libra. So Sun is going to be exalted here, and Mars is aspecting here. So Mars is Swa here. So literally, this independent business house and also partnership house, like business partners as well as personal life partners, or that sort of thing, is going to be on fire. So he's going to be a master of his independent business, which is his. He was a traveling violinist virtuoso. But all of this, Sun and Mars, it's going to be a huge besides being a leader, he's going to have this huge libido, which again, he's known for his many relationships. Um, but between the third, fifth, and seventh house, um, that's where he got his, world success tours and stuff like that. The eighth house here is aspected. The lord of it is Venus, which is debilitated and aspected by Mercury and Mars. So I think this is somebody he's always thinking about, like how to obtain resources, essentially, like how to acquire stuff, how to kind of talk and act in a way that would, you know, connect him with people that would, bring him more of that stuff. Yeah. So what else? Ninth house here. The ninth lord is Mercury. And the moon's here in probably Punarvasu. It's aspected by Sun. Sorry, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. So it's like, talking about best of times, worst of times. So in the beginning of his career, he was given special prizes by the Pope and Vatican. And then at the end of his life, he was refused burial in a sort of one of the higher echelon type burial places or whatever because he had such a poor reputation, personal poor reputation. And it took years, I guess. I think he had a son. His son had to appeal to the new pope or something to get his body exhumed and reburied in a more proper place or something, a more honorable place. So yeah, so this war, Jupiter Saturn war, is going to affect his relationship with authority and religious authority here in the ninth house. Um, and it's going to go back and forth. It's going to swing back and forth. So the 10th house is the Lord is the moon, and the moon has gone to the ninth house. So what that can indicate in somebody's life is that their career derives good through support of like public funding, or in his case, like religious funding from. But also he was like the city what was it, orchestras and things like that. He was first chair, so he was deriving some benefit from uh, government sources, but most of his money came from his solo virtuoso concerts and stuff like that. Um, then what else? The 11th house. Well, the 11th house lord is his debilitated sun. and is aspected by Jupiter, which is in Mula. So I think he was social, but I don't think he had great relationships, and was probably erratic because he was always on the road and playing, and his health and all this kind of stuff. So I think socially, um, it was not a very solid or steadfast kind of situation for him. That 12th house, oh, well, been talking about the whole time, really. Mercury, the aspects its own. So there's going to be some protection of losses, but especially once you get to K2, it's like just one loss after another. And he even had, like, I think, had a casino in France that just, went bust pretty quickly. But you can see with the four potential planets here, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and K2, that's a lot of erratic behavior, so losses due to that. All the houses that these planets are attached to, so like the second house family, losses there. What else? Even the seventh house, because Mars rules the seventh house, Venus, the eighth house, Mercury, the ninth house. So, half the chart is owned by Mercury, Venus, or Mars. So, uh, you know, um, it caught up to him. Yeah, so what did I write here? Losses due to erratic behavior, government, mind, family, speech, business, drugs, casino. And essentially with Mars and K2 there, it's like he literally, like, maybe literally lost his grip on all these things he was really trying to obtain throughout his life. So you can see where, even in his own chart, in his own life, there's this example of this amazing talent or ability that lives on through the ages, and is inspiring. And then there's these other aspects of the life that are just, um, devastating, right? So it's kind of what we're potentially looking at coming up here. Okay, so Venus and Mars in April, April 3rd, Venus moves into Uttar Bhadrapada Nakshatra. It's going to be like potentially a conscious release of a relationship, to pursue career goals, is what I wrote here. And that's possibly because um, Rahu is there, so there's like a lot of ambition energy here, and Sun is there, so career is here. The career planet's here. Um, So it's not like it's not like, because Venus is moving from Purva Bhadrapada, where maybe there was a forced ending or unexpected ending, where it's more of like a conscious ending that's going on in these things. April 9th through 12th is that Mars Saturn planetary war. So, new guard versus old guard, innovation versus tradition. This could also be property fights. Um, because Mars and Saturn are both Bhumi Karakas, they're both symbolize property, especially land. Um, so, like, I just got in the mail, if we go back to that, Jupiter, Mercury, and the Lugna for when I was comparing April 1st to April 30th and how the energy is shifting through the month. And you had Saturn and Mars coming into war in the 11th house, which is clubs, groups, and societies. Like, again, in my own little life, I got notice in the mail, legal notice in the mail, that one of my neighbors is in a legal situation, a property fight with the town. so, so I was like, on a small scale, that's, what I'm seeing, yeah, in my world. So, but Mars and Saturn, and we'll see here. So Mars, so the war starts on the 9th, but then the 10th, Mars moves into Purva Bhadrapada. So it moves from Shatabisha. They're both in Shatabisha, which is like something that's difficult to heal or diagnose, even, or understand. The Purva Bhadrapada is the front two legs, symbolized by the front two legs of a funeral pyre. So, combustion, right? And it's ruled by the deity Rudra, which is the god of like storms and stuff like that. And Mars is an erratic planet. So, April 10th, is, yeah, it looks like there's going to be some kind of fallout here. And the thing is, because it's with Saturn, um, it's not just like going to blow up and like blow over. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be some abrupt change, and could even be something like an infection or accident. Um, but it's going to have long-term consequences. So like maybe somebody unfortunately gets into an accident and it's not just like, okay, in a month or two, they're better. It could be that, there's some sort of scar tissue that never allows them full function again. And then, and on top of that, on April 11th, Mars is going to be in a mutual aspect with Ketu, which I've been talking about over and over again through my videos the last few months about how explosive that energy is. Um, and in the mix of that is going to be Sun, Venus, and Mercury. So, what I'm seeing here is that there's going to be this explosive method for regaining control, of whatever it is on a small scale or a large scale. So, yeah, it is what it is. So then April 13th, Venus enters Revati, which is kind of nice. Revati is a pretty gentle nakshatra. It's all about hospitality and traveling and things like that. It's also the last nakshatra of the last constellation, so it's all about also ending cycles. And because we're talking about Venus here, this could also be about ending relationship cycles. Not necessarily ending a relationship, but ending relationship cycles. Because since Venus has been, exalted in Pisces this whole month, relationships might have been a little bit softer, gentler, that sort of thing. And maybe even like an effort, to have peaceful conversations because Mercury is there too. Um, uh, but you'll see Venus is moving into Aries in about 10 days after this Revati. So it's going to be 10 days of this kind of gentler energy. Venus will cross Rahu on April 17th. And Rahu is about ambition. So this could be like a new ambition and love and art and travel. Those are things Venus represents. It could literally be, I think I told you guys this in another video. Was it last year, the year before, when Venus crossed Rahu? Rahu can, is like one of the symbols of Rahu is a snake, and Venus can symbolize things like vehicles. And on the day when Venus crossed Rahu, again, last year, the year before, I was going to my garage. I opened up the garage door, and literally a snake fell down from the garage door in front of my eyes, almost on my head. And I looked down at my feet, and there was like this little snake. And luckily, it was like a little snake, and it wasn't like poisonous or anything, but it still freaked me out. But I was just like, I mean, I'm just like laughing to myself as an astrologer. I'm like, okay, Venus crossed Rahu, like literally. Um, here I'm going in my car, and the snake falls on my head. Some like bizarre thing happens, while traveling or with your vehicle. So that happened. Yeah, it really did. So there might be, there might also be like some kind of when you have Venus and Rahu together, or Venus and Ketu together, either one. This could be somebody, if you're meeting somebody new, meeting somebody who's really quite different from yourself in any kind of way. It could be financial, it could be physical, it could be ethnic, it could be cultural, language, whatever, age. And with Rahu, Venus being exalted and Rahu being there might be travel involved. Also, there could be technology involved. So, maybe meeting somebody online, that sort of thing. Then 18th or 19th of April, Venus, Mercury in a planetary war. I've discussed that Mercury slide. So I don't think there might be some disagreements here, but I don't think anything too wild, because Venus is exalted in Pisces. And then Mars is going to enter Pisces on April 22nd. When Mars enters Pisces, you're now going to have a parivartana exchange of houses with Jupiter. So then you can bring Jupiter back into Pisces. That's going to make it even more cohesive. But you're also going to bring Mars into Aries, which is going to make it more fiery. And Sun is going to be there at that time. So you're going to have Sun and Mars in Aries, like you saw in Paganini's chart. So there's going to be like, this could like literally light a fire under you. 'Cause Aries is a fire. You're going to have the two fire planets in a fire sign of new action. This could result in like pioneering something, and again, online dating potentially, because then you're going to have Rahu, Venus, Mercury, Mars together. So hold on to your hats though, because I mentioned, or in the beginning, Venus and Jupiter are going combust. And Venus is at the end, right? Is in Revati. It's only got a few more days in this kind of lovely, beautiful Piscean sea that is Pisces, but things are going to shift pretty quickly in the next week. So, and also I mentioned Mars and Mercury together could be a liar's combination. So I would also be careful. And again, do what you're going to do. Just keep your eyes open. This could be meeting somebody who initially seems really great online, and then it's like things go haywire after that. That's an acute possibility here. So Venus does move into Aries and Ashwini on April 24th. So this can be new activity. This could be rescuing a relationship. This could be somebody like a relationship with somebody who's like a rescuer type person. you know, it could also be like reviving, like, some kind of art, interest in art or travel. But it could also be a cyber attack because once Venus moves out of Pisces, um, you're not going to have as much compassionate energy there anymore. And you're just going to have Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Rahu. And Jupiter will potentially hold things together a little bit, but Jupiter's moving into Taurus very soon and it's going combust. So, you know, so yeah, so just be careful of your computer stuff. 27th of April, Mars enters Uttar Bhadrapada, so conscious ending of activities. Um, so if things were stormy, with Mars being in Purva Bhadrapada, and now it's just like, okay, maybe I'm gonna consciously end this. Like I kept thinking of Gwyneth Paltrow when she talked about years ago about conscious uncoupling. That might be this Mars entering Uttar Bhadrapada once Venus has moved on, and once Jupiter is about to shift out of this, or at least no longer have an influence. Then April 28th, Venus goes combust. So lust outward, social cohesion, romantic expression. This could be it's all lovey-dovey and then the partner goes cold. It could also be literally the partner kind of disappears. Not necessarily that the relationship disappears, although that's a possibility, depending on what planets you're running and what especially your D9 Amsha divisional chart looks like. But it could be that your partner like is distant or traveling. Or might be busy with things because Venus is going to be in Aries where the sun is, so it might be that the spouse or partner is just super busy with work. And so you don't see them because of that. Or they may be traveling for work, that sort of thing. So you just might, again, not see so much of that lovey-dovey energy. The other thing is, especially for women, this Venus-Jupiter simultaneous combust situation can be particularly acute because for women, some Vedic astrologies will, I think all astrologers, no, I shouldn't say all, I don't know. I've never done a survey, but as far as I'm aware, most astrologers will assess Venus for like a partner, like a romantic partner, spouse like partner, that sort of thing. But some astrologers also look at Jupiter, sort of the female kind of counterpart energy for women. So the other thing is that Jupiter can represent children. So again, if somebody's like distant, like maybe traveling for work, maybe they won't see their spouse and their children, or a lot of may. Or maybe, again, it's kind of like a lot's going on here. Maybe they're putting out fires, whatever Virgo represents for them, where you have this mutual aspect between Mars and Ketu and that kind of explosive energy. Maybe the spouse is off trying to deal with that. Because of that, you don't really see the spouse and kids, that kind of situation. So it might be quiet on the romance, kind of scene in May. And generally speaking, if I didn't mention already, from a muhurta perspective or auspicious timing perspective, when either Venus or Jupiter is combust, it's generally not considered a great time to start something. And when they're both combust, you can imagine probably even worse. So if you can avoid it, if you have any flexibility, you might really be conscious. If anything's really super important, probably May is not going to be the best month to start that up. On the flip side, though, um, sometimes when Venus goes combust, you can get more of this. You feel the love more deeply within yourself, even if you're not seeing it on the external plane. So it can be this like distance makes the heart grow fonder type situation as well. The thing is, Venus is going to be combust. Jupiter is mostly combust through May, and then it's back. But Venus is going to be combust until July 10th. So that's a good, what, almost 2.5 months of Venus being combust. So just keep all that in mind if you're meeting new people out there. It might be a little bit dicey. Or there might be, again, like a shift, like you might feel like, oh, this is fantastic. And like a week or two later, like, what happened? And it's like, oh, Jupiter shifted signs. And sometimes people like relationships will fall apart like suddenly or unexpectedly, or like somebody will ghost you if either you or they shifted planet periods. Like maybe you met them one week and then before your next date or something, they shifted planet periods. It could be because of that their energy shifted elsewhere besides where it was with you. So, it's good to know so you don't take all these things personally. All right, so the sun, April 4th, sun crosses Rahu. Sun is in a friend sign in Pisces. It's conjoined with an exalted Venus. So that's pretty nice. So this could be like a sudden emotional pursuit or graceful moment in career leadership. Because Rahu's there, that's ambition. Sun is career, but it's going to be with this exalted Venus. So, there might be like a boost, like a promotion or something I could see here, or some sort of accolade, maybe money. Could be, depending on which house Pisces is for you. April 8th, there's going to be that solar eclipse, and it's going to be a solar eclipse, surya grahan. So, the sun's going to go combust as well as the moon. That's going to be in Pisces Revati. That's going to be conjoined with Rahu and Venus. So again, this could be like a whole new phase of feelings, clothes, aesthetics, art, relationships. These are all things that Venus represents. And these could be things like I could see how all of this is like, especially if you got a boost in your career and maybe you got a promotion or something, your business relationships might change, your social time might change. You might need a new wardrobe, that sort of thing. Like it's sort of like it might be kind of like an unexpected glow up, at least a mini one, especially because also Sun is moving into Aries where it's going to be exalted, in a few days, about a week or so after this. So, this might be you get the promotion and then a week or two later you show up, as your new self in that professional mode. April 11th, Mercury crosses Sun. So, and Mercury's it's still going to be retrograde at that point. So reviewing decisions, communications, travel, education, colleagues, and all is associated with the above. So again, this could be the announcement. Like maybe on the 8th, you are told that you get the promotion, or maybe the decision's made to promote you, but you don't even know it yet. And then when Mercury crosses Sun, that's when you hear about it or when it's sort of announced. And then a few days later is when it all starts. Yeah. April 13th, Sun enters Aries, Mesha, Ashwini. So it's all about brand new start, a lot of energy, a lot of fire. Um, Sun is exalted. Aries is a friend sign for Sun. It's conjoined with Jupiter. So there's going to be a lot of, good feelings, good energy here, at least for a while, at least till the end of the month. This could also be like a whole new cycle for the soul, like even if it's not a professional thing or a career thing, just your soul, because that's what Sun represents also. It could also be fatherhood, because the sun represents fathers, besides leadership and career and stuff like that. So um, those are all possibilities depending on your chart. Then on April 27th, Sun enters into Bharani nakshatra. And this even more so because Jupiter, Sun is going to be conjoined with Jupiter, Venus, and Mars there. This and Bharani nakshatra is symbolized by a womb. So again, birth and death, cycles of birth and death. This could literally be somebody becoming a father. So especially if Aries is your fifth house, which would be 1, 12, 11, 10, 9. That would be like a Sag person. Um, yeah, Sagittarius rising sign. If you have Aries in your fifth house, this could be like a birth of a new child. And even if it's not like a biological child, it could be like parent becoming a foster parent or adoptive parent or a mentor, especially if you're bumping up in your career. Now, people who are kind of on your same level are now going to be potentially reporting to you or looking to you for answers, with questions and stuff like that. Because also at the end of the month, by this time in April, Jupiter will be moving from Bharani nakshatra to Kritika nakshatra. And Kritika nakshatra is symbolized by Kartikeya, the celestial leader of the army, very successful, valiant, dressed in gold plated material and all this. And so it can be a very fiery energy. But part of the Kartikeya story is that he was raised by a very foster mother. So Kritika can represent like a foster parent type energy. So it could be that going on for some of you. Okay, so I have another chart here. Um, and this may not be the correct chart for chart. I started going through his chart, or what I thought was his chart, and then when I kind of stepped back, I'm like, I'm not sure this is really his chart. So that also brings up the idea. A lot of times when people post questions for me, they're mostly technical questions. Um, what is this and how is this, and and that's all really important to have solid basics to be able to read a chart. But what I almost never get asked about is intuition. Because you really need both, I think, to be a good astrologer. And even one of my teachers said, if you're that intuitive, if you're super duper intuitive, you don't really need astrology anymore. So if that tells you anything, maybe astrology is the more important of, the intuitive mind versus the, analytical mind. Um, I can't say I'm so intuitive that I don't need astrology anymore, but, who knows, maybe one day. With enough sadhana and spiritual practice, maybe. But anyway, this is the potential chart of Charlie Chaplin. Um, he was born, well, they don't really know because there's no written document. There is no birth chart for him that anybody's found. But in his own biography, he said his birthday, and again, who knows if he made this up or not, was April 16th, 1889, and 8 o'clock in the evening, London, England. Okay, so I decided to use this information to drop this chart, and I did the analysis, and I think in some ways it works. Then when I went and read his biography to double check what I came up with, I was like, some of this chart that I'm showing you right now does not work. So I don't think this is the correct birth chart, although you get some information from it since it is a moon rising chart. But again, they don't even in the information they have about his birth date, besides his biography, and there's no birth certificate, is that there were various announcements that were made in the papers, but they were um, contradicting each other. So who really knows, when he was born? And he might have just at some point said, "Oh, this is when I was born," so he got study, so people would stop asking him the question. But in any case, if this was his right chart, which I don't think it is, but if it was, his Lagna Nakshatra would be Swati and the moon would also be in Swati. So We know from Paganini's chart that Swati is all about new grown grass blowing in the wind, so it's about new beginnings, but it's also about being fragile. Okay. The day lord was Mars, and the Hora lord was Sun, again, assuming this is a correct chart. The birth dasha was also Rahu Venus, so Mars and Sun together is leadership, which clearly he was. Rahu and Venus together, Rahu can be like technology and ambition, which he was interested in both, and Venus is art. And Rahu with Venus together could be like an unusual art, such as film, which was a very unusual art for him at his time. He was at the beginning of that whole movement. So the Dasha sequence for him was Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, Venus, Sun. Okay. Now, why, so I did this analysis and then I was like, okay, this looks pretty good. And then when I read the biography, I was like, maybe not. So the part that does work really well, I think, potentially, is the seventh house, which we'll get into. Because you have Mars and Sun. Sun is exalted in Aries, and Mars is in its own house, which again looks very much like our sky pattern. So there's going to be a lot of energy, a lot of fire in his seventh house of independent business, which was explosive for him. Kind of like the way Paganini's chart looks, with Mars and Saturn weren't in the seventh house, but they were aspecting the seventh house, which was Aries. So they're both very strong there. So you had another leader. So what threw me about this chart was that in his biography, they talked about his early life was very chaotic. His mother was in a insane asylum. He slept on the street sometimes. He lived with various relatives. Sometimes his dad was gone. His mother did some stage work, um, but then had mental illness, and then she did some other menial labor stuff. So if we look at the fourth house for him here, Saturn is in Ashleisha, which could bring since it's aspect in the fourth house, it could bring something like um, theater and film and stuff like that. Because Ashleisha is symbol of that is a snake, and it's all about kind of this mesmerizing energy. And I do see a lot of like actresses and models with an Ashleisha placement, because to be an actress or model, you want to be mesmerizing and like capture people's attention and hold it, right? So Saturn is aspecting into the fourth house here. So, his mom had some acting experience. But the thing is, Saturn is aspecting its own sign, which would mean that mom was fairly strong. Um, and the family line was pretty strong when like neither parent was very stable. I could tell. So that I was like, maybe that kind of threw me. The other thing is that the fifth house for him in this chart is Aquarius. He has no planets aspecting it, and the Lord is again the Saturn in Ashleisha. I might think with that is that if he had kids, he wouldn't have many, and if he had them, they might be quite sick. Because Ashleisha can also represent things like medicine and illness and stuff like that. He had, I think, 11 kids. I was like, from this chart, wow, okay, so that I was like, no, I'm not sure this is the right chart. So, and then another thing that threw me with this chart is that when I read his biography, is that he had, towards the end of his life, a bunch of different strokes to the point where when he was awarded, I think, knighthood or something by the Queen of England, I think it was, he was so sick, he had so many strokes at that point that he had to receive the knighthood in a wheelchair. So when I saw that, um, I started thinking that maybe this chart was actually upside down, like his true chart. Again, they don't even know potentially what day he was born because there was no written record. But I think this chart would fit his whole life better if it was upside down from what I have it as here. So as I go through this chart, just know that this is like a work in progress. Think of this as like a rough draft of like a first round, kind of like if you were around for that. I think it was in the fall, about the same time. In the fall, we were going through eclipses and Mercury was retrograde. kind of like now. And I think I mentioned in my last video that doing astrology when you have eclipses going on and Mercury retrograde at the same time simultaneously is just like, good luck because you have double layers of like confusion and checking and rechecking and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I decided to just leave this as it is, so that again, because part of my videos are all about process rather than just outcome. Um, but also it's just again, more of a pointing out that the technical piece is just as important as the intuitive piece. And if your intuition is just like, I don't know if this is the right chart or not. Like I remember when I was going through with one of my teachers and he had the chart of Simone de Beauvoir, the French philosopher. And he was going through her chart, and there was just something about her chart. I don't know. And I was like a newbie. I didn't know anything really. And so I was just like, there was just something about her chart. I'm like, this doesn't seem right to me. And yeah, I think it was because of her seventh house. Her seventh house was the chart he presented was Taurus. So that would have been like most of her partners would have been Taurus types. So it was like steady, grounded, but she was like, had like some kind of unconventional relationship with Sartre. Like I was like, I don't think Sartre was a Taurus, but if you shift it and her chart was close to the cusp. So I was like, maybe instead of being a Scorpio, she was actually a Libra, then her partners would be Aries types. And I was like, that made more sense to me. And I brought it to my teacher and he was like, yeah, I don't know. And so I started looking around because I don't know, somehow my mind wouldn't let it go. And came to find out that there was, specifically in France, there was an adjustment of time right about the time that she was born. And so if you accounted for that, it was almost like a daylight savings time type thing. Um, if you accounted for that, then she actually was a Libra instead of a Scorpio. So again, it was just somehow this the seventh house. I was like, really? She dated all these Taurus people? I mean, she didn't date any Taurus people. They were all like, Aries, renegade type, unusual type. I don't know. I just it didn't really fit. So anyway, so sometimes again, your intuition shows you the truth more than all your analysis and technical blah blah blah. Yeah. So anyway, okay, let's talk about the charts. And again, this is, probably not the right chart, but let's just see what we see. I think there's still some learning to be had here. So, Libra Tula, rising sign, movable air sign. So, somebody with a lot of ideas. I think that's true. Okay. Then moon is in Swati. The moon, so again, this is the moon in this like new grown grass blowing in the wind. I mean, I don't know. That I was sort of like, was he that fragile? Really? I don't know. I don't know if he was that fragile. Maybe he was sensitive. I don't know how fragile he was. I mean, he was a pretty strong guy. He was directing films, I think like even in his teens or early 20s, and he became a producer. And at some point he kind of has a chart sort of like Clint Eastwood. I think I did Clint Eastwood's chart, I think last year, and if I remember correctly, Clint Eastwood had this kind of like Sun Mars combination in Aries, where at some point he just started to he wasn't just an actor; he just started taking things over. And I think even his process was pretty similar, like because Clint Eastwood would rarely do double takes on any scenes. He would just say like tell the actors like, okay, just go do this scene, and he just do it raw the first time. So there was no like, preparation. It was just like, very improvised. So very, probably even more realistic than being very studied. And apparently, Charlie Chaplin had a similar kind of process where he would just write in the notes, like I don't know what they call the notes, and but he's just like, begin train scene or something, and then that was the only direction the actors were given, so they had to make it up as they went along. So it's kind of funny that they were sort of had similar. Um, kind of styles and also a trajectory in their career of where they start off acting and then very quickly they were directing and producing as well and had their own like production companies and stuff like that. So anyway, So yeah, moon and Swati, but the moon moves quickly, so I was like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. But if he was born on this day, and that's suspect, the moon would have been in Libra, but I'm guessing for him, he was probably, I'm guessing he was more of a Vishaka. He might have been more of a Vishaka type person, because he was pretty aggressive guy. But anyway, um, we don't even know if we're looking at the right lugna. And aspecting this lugna was an exalted sun, although it's going to be debilitated there, and then he's going to have a swan Mars. So he's still going to get fire in his personality and in his, physique. And then he's got Venus retrograde aspecting into Libra. So with Moon and Venus, it's going to be about aesthetics and the arts. Mars and Sun are going to bring leadership energy. Um, so all of that, he's going to be a pioneer, innovator in arts and aesthetics. He's going to have a famous face. He's going to have both a sweet and spicy personality because he's got the fire and he's got the Moon and Venus there. He's going to be quite passionate because he's going to have Venus, Mars, and Moon together. Those are the three of four, passion planets together. But he's going to have this kind of nervous restless side to him, and maybe that's why he was so prodigiously active in his field. The Lugnatia is Venus, and Venus has gone to the seventh house, and he was all about the seventh house in many ways: independent business, relationships. I mean, he had numerous marriages and sexual partners and things like that. Various business partners. It seemed like every few months. I mean, it seemed like very rarely did he even stick with one production house or a creative house for, I don't know, even a year. It's about enjoyment, and also it's about enjoyment. So that was like, a lot of his life. So, most of it seems like it's accurate for him. Then the second house here, we have Scorpio aspected by its ruling planet Mars. So the second house is going to be quite strong for him. So that would make him famous for his voice and his body. Although he started off in silent films, and even make him like a sex symbol, especially with the moon and Venus aspecting his lugna. This would make him, quite attractive in the face and body, and be like I guess what comes to mind is chick magnet. He's a ladies' man. You're getting that from this, but also with the Mars aspecting second house, a lot of money, and also his family life again would be quite stable. So again, I'm just like, with his early childhood, I'm like, he grew up in poverty and he was like one of these rags to riches stories. So even though he made money, I mean, he never ran Mars, the, so I was like, I don't know, maybe not, a question mark in my mind. Then the third house, the Lord is a Swa Jupiter. So that's going to be, third house of classic arts and stuff like that. And K2's there, so it's going to be unusual. This could be film. But the thing is, Jupiter and K2 and Purvashada. So Purvashada is like a winnowing, the symbol is a winnowing basket. So it's going to be like sifting through. And, that's a possibility because it was a new profession, a new kind of arts. And, he was kind of new in the beginning. And then I found out sometimes his process for creating films was a lot longer than other people. And so because he was like churning through things, more than other people. Like he would actually stop production for a few days until he got like some new inspiration, and he'd pick up production again, and that was, I'm sure, long and tedious and expensive. But he yeah, so he was sifting through, and I don't know, like because he was so successful so young, I was surprised to kind of see this. Like I could see where um maybe what is it? Jupiter Rahu, like opposite, like Jupiter Rahu might be his true third house, which again, if you flip the chart upside down, would make more sense. Yeah, because then there would be all this ambition and drive, and you would still get the film piece there. Um, yeah. And then let's see, one, two, three, two. And then I don't know where Rahu, I don't remember if Rahu's in Purvashada or in Ardra, because that would make even more sense. If Rahu was in Ardra, then you would get electricity there, then you would definitely get like film and ambition and drive. And I don't think his ambition and drive potentially, I mean, it could be the ninth house because the ninth house is authority. So especially since his father was mostly absent through his life and there was no solid, like he was even like in a group home and stuff, like he was all over the place as a kid, and even on the street, I think sometimes. Um, that maybe what he was looking for was for him to be his own boss, see it like that. But I was like, yeah, I was like, I don't know about the third house there. But anyway, this third house is quite strong, and you could see where it would be quite active for him, especially since he was running Jupiter early on. So that is a possibility. The fourth house, again, fourth house lord is Saturn and Ashlesha aspecting its own. I mean, he would, his mom are probably family blue collar, which they were. But the thing is, again, that Saturn in its own sign is going to bring some stability, even if there would be poverty, and there was no stability. But if you flip the chart upside down, then Saturn in the fourth house in Ashlesha, that's not going to be particularly strong. And that would give his mother, um, the acting stuff with the Ashlesha nakshatra bit. But, there would be a lot of difficulties, delays, obstacles in home life, family. And then if Moon is also in Swati, which who knows if it is, the Lord of again the fourth house, if you flip this chart upside down, would be in Swati. So again, there would be this fragility that would bring. I could see that bringing like mental illness, like to be institutionalized, like his mom was, to the fourth house of mom. That seems like, again, if you flip the chart upside down, that seems like a more accurate um, fourth house for him with his whole history. The other thing is that when his career really took off in the Saturn period, you could see here Saturn is not super strong. And it actually brings debility to the seventh house of independent business. What if you flip the chart upside down? Saturn is aspecting its own sign. And it is aspecting, then it would be aspecting the first house. So it may be that his career blew up in the Saturn period, which it did, but it also probably all that overworking, wrecked his health. That's a possibility. Again, if you turn the chart upside down. So anyway, then the fifth house, if we're looking at this one, the fifth house lord is Saturn. Um, so this could be, Aquarius. This is ideas, and Saturn's in Shlesha. So like ideas of like how to like capture people's attention, how to make things mesmerizing, captivating. That's what his mind, his intellect wraps around. Sixth house, you have Mercury debilitated, kind of like now, um, or just recently, or will be when Mercury goes back to Pisces. Mercury will aspect its own house in the 12th house, protecting from some losses. So this was also, I think, flipped because when he went into, was it Mercury? I think when he went into Mercury period, he was traveling in Europe, and the United States government would not let him come back to the United States for his political things that he was doing with his films. And then also, I guess he was fairly scandalous because he was marrying all these like potentially underage women and stuff like that and had a bunch of relationships. Anyway, um, if Mercury was aspecting the sixth house, um, I don't, and Saturn is aspecting as well. It could go either way. I mean, that could be where, you're purposely moving abroad versus like you're basically not allowed back into your home country. Um, yeah, so could be, go either way, I think. So anyway, getting back to this. So sixth house though, Jupiter's there. So there could be issues with collaborators, artistic collaborators. This, again, the sixth house is enemies potentially, and debilitate Mercury. This could be like legal fallout with friends and businesses, which definitely happened for him with his long career. Seventh house is again on fire. You have a Swa, Mars, exalted Sun, leadership, leadership, leadership. You have Moon and Venus in the house. So the arts, you have Jupiter here, publishing, a lot, expansion. You have Saturn here, which is actually going to bring some debility here, but Saturn is also in Ashlesha, so it's going to bring, film. Um, yeah. And actually, you do also get K2 here because you get 5-9 aspects from K2, and K2 will potentially bring um, film as well. So independent business partnerships of all kinds, personal, professional, pioneer, innovator, competitive in the arts. So he did all that. As an actor, director, producer, composer. He also composed music. So, potentially that could be his third house, Jupiter and Purvashada in its own house. Then his ninth house, he had Mercury. Oh, the Lord is Mercury. Rahu's in Punarvasu. Oh, okay, Rahu's in Punarvasu, not Ardra. But again, it's like this coming and going aspected by Jupiter. So that could be again like his father um, was a singer but absent. So again, if I'm looking at Jupiter Swa with K2 versus Jupiter with Rahu and Mercury, I would think the Swa Jupiter K2 would be his because his dad was a singer, but also like in and out, barely there as a child. So again, that makes me think if the chart was upside down, it would make more sense. But I'd have to really sit down and spend a lot of time to figure it out. And also with the Rahu there would be like a drive towards again spirituality, government, religion, potentially. When I see Rahu in the ninth house, that's usually somebody that's got fairly religious. I don't know if he was. I didn't read anything about religion in his bio, but it may not just be there. Then the 10th house Lord is a full moon, so that's nice, but it's in Swati. If we believe it's Swati. Then Saturn there, a lot of obstacles and delays, especially when his career really took off in Saturn. That didn't make sense to me. There's also an aspect by Mars. So this again could be that like he had some menial labor jobs, which he did. He actually went to like factories where children were working. His mom would send him to the factories to make some money to help the family. Um, and there would be a lot of industriousness here, but I'm not seeing a lot of success like the way that he was successful. So, and you would see him potentially like, even though his relationships were not stable, like his home life would still be stable, which I don't think it ever was. Um, well, he did end up marrying somebody. His last wife, I think he stayed married till he died, and they had 8 children. I think that was the case. Anyway, so maybe that's when he finally developed some stability in his life. Um, his home life. But he was I think older than the Saturn period. Because I think the last wife he married when he was 54. So I don't know if he was 54 on Saturn or Mercury. Anyway. So, what else? Yeah, but I don't think that again his 10th house is not fantastic. I mean, a lot of heavy work, but not anything fabulous. And if his, again, it makes more sense if the chart is flipped upside down. Then the 11th house, he had an exalted sun. So again, potentially more money. The other thing is like all of life is a stage, because Leo is kind of like a stage. So I think the socializing he did was all about just making more money and producing more stuff. The 11th house was also aspected by Jupiter and K2. So again, I think any socializing he did was all about, it was more about promotion rather than like making like real friends. Mm, it was more about schmoozing. The 12th house Lord's Mercury aspects its own. So there's some protection of losses, but um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think things actually started falling apart for him more with Mercury. I don't know. I don't. I'm not expert on his career, but I'd have to look at some important dates to figure out, again, if I was going to redo this like the way I did Coco Chanel's chart, because I kind of did this kind of thing with her in the fall, and I thought I got it, but something about it wasn't sitting right with me, and then I did a whole video on her, so I might have to do a whole video on him, Charlie Chaplin. But in any case, I think even if this chart is upside down, this massive Mars Sun combination in Aries, I think tells you a lot already. So if you ever see a chart with Mars and Sun and Aries, even if it's some other house for the person, you can anticipate that that's going to be a massive, massive house for them in their life. All right. So the moon, we've got a couple things going on here. I do separate videos on the moon, the new moon and full moon, and because we have a solar eclipse, I'll be doing a separate video on that, so I don't get too detailed about the moon transits in this monthly video. But on April 8th, there's going to be a solar eclipse, Surya Grahan and Pisces Mina and Revati. We've been kind of talking about that. So Pisces is a dual water sign, Joseph Bhavajal. It's a neutral sign for Sun or the moon, and it's going to be conjoined with Rahu and Venus besides the Sun. And so again, there's this new phase of like feelings and clothes, aesthetics and art and relationships. And again, this might be um, because the sun is about to, cross Rahu and that sort of thing. But there should be this kind of, it's almost like pushing the restart button on soul, the career, the mind. Um, yeah, and so that's why there might be this outward activity of kind of as a new development of self and identity coming through. Then April 23rd, there's a full moon in Libra Tula and Swati Nakshatra. So Libra is a movable air sign, Chara Vayu. It's a neutral sign for the moon. It's going to be aspected by an exalted sun, Swa, Mars, and Jupiter in Critica. That's going to be quite lively. So leadership of self and others, and there's going to be this like fighting spirit, you know. Yeah, so but it's going to be like a fledgling type of fighting spirit because um, Swati is again that newborn grass blowing in the wind. So again, separate videos coming on these two events. Then we have the long or slow moving planets. So Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, Rahu, Ketu. April 4th, Sun crosses Rahu. I've mentioned that, and probably that might be like a promotion or shift in career. April 6th, Saturn enters Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra. So Sun has been in Shatabisha for a very long time, and people might be thinking, oh, well, good, it's moving, but it's moving into Purva Bhadrapada, which is like much more. Satabisha is kind of like more unknown and like kind of like researching and trying to figure things out. Purva Bhadrapada can be more of like a destructive energy. And since Saturn represents like death and chronic disease and stuff like that, this might be more of a, destruction and endings type of energy. So yeah, in some ways, like Saturn can get even more virulence potentially here in a few days. April 8th, the solar eclipse, which I mentioned a bit, and we'll talk about more separately. 9th through 12th, the Mars Saturn planetary war I talked about on the Mars slide. 11th of April, Mars mutual aspect with K2 explosive energy I talked about on the Mars slide. 16th of April, Jupiter enters Kritika Nakshatra. I mentioned a little bit on the Sun slide because of potentially people becoming like fathers, literally. Um, and so, think about Jupiter. Jupiter's a dual planet, and it's going to be moving into a dual nakshatra. So again, there's this protection energy from Kartikeya, the leader of the celestial army, and then there's this nurturing energy of the foster mothers who raised him. I kind of think of Kritika as like mother bear energy, where it's like, she's like sweetly nurturing and taking care of her cubs. But if somebody comes around, she's like fierce mama, protecting her cubs. So it can kind of swing both ways, this nakshatra. But also Kritika, I've seen when people have important placements in Kritika, they can often be like writers and speakers. So you can see with the things that Jupiter symbolizes in Kritika, you might see a new shift towards writing, teaching, speaking, finance, charity, volunteering, especially when Jupiter moves into Taurus. That's April 17th, Venus crosses Rahu. I mentioned that. May 1st, again, talking a little bit about May, but I'm bringing it up because it's pretty big. Jupiter enters Taurus, Rishabha, and Jupiter is going to be in Taurus until May 14th. So a good year, May 14th of 2025. Taurus is a fixed Earth sign, Stira Prithvi. It's it's actually an enemy sign for Jupiter. So you can see that like where Aries is more about initiation, Taurus is more about grounded development. So whatever Jupiter might have started in Aries will kind of see more practical reality. It's kind of like when rubber meets the road or passion meets reality. And you can also kind of think of gardening where it's going to be a slower process because you need to wait for the seeds to kind of develop. But you might see and hear like speech and writing, art, research, spirituality, but slow and steady expansion as opposed to like more explosive but unsteady expansion of what Jupiter offered in Aries. May 3rd, Jupiter goes combust or asta, and this is going to be until June 2nd of this year. So, again, when the planet goes combust, you don't see the external manifestations as much, but you feel them more internally. So there might be a greater sense of justice, generosity, more interest in education, um, speaking, but again, like internally, like maybe journaling as opposed to actually speaking out loud to others. There might be more of an interest in children, um, teaching, spirituality, you know, that sort of thing, charity even. Okay, so we have a third chart here. This is Friedrich Froebel. That may not ring any bells, but he was an important person in history, so let's find out about him. He was born on April 21st, 1782, possibly 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't have an exact birth time, but when I found out about his life and what he does, I think 10 o'clock, around 10 o'clock, makes a lot of sense, and I'll talk about why. So he was born in Oberweisbach, Germany. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the Lugna Nakshatra would be Pusha, and the Moon Nakshatra would also be Pusha. So Pusha is represented by a cow's udder. So it's a very nurturing and stabilizing, like emotional stabilizing energy there. So if the Lugna and Moon are both in Pusha, that would be like a very nurturing, mothering type of person. And Moon is in its own sign, so that is gonna give this person strength and body and mind, personality. So the day lord was either Saturn or Sun, depending on what time of day you're looking at. And the Hora Lord, don't know. The birth to Shah before 10 o'clock was Saturn. So, again, a lot of stability here, a lot of building, a lot of long-term thinking, planning of nurturing. So, again, you kind of get those two energies together. So, again, I don't know if this is their exact birth time, but at least this should be Chandra Lagna, so a moon rising chart. So we have Cancer Karka person here, movable water sign, so Chara Jal, for somebody with a lot of emotions. The moon is bright, it's in its own sign, so the moon's going to be strong. So again, that's going to bring even more because the moon represents mothering energy and the mother. So not only is the nakshatra potentially Lagna nakshatra and Pusha, the moon nakshatra and Pusha, but the moon's very strong. So this somebody's going to be very nurturing, mothering, stabilizing, emotionally intuitive, a person with personal power, and also because the moon goes to itself, its own sign in the first house, that creates a bhavam. So there's going to be a lot about development, personal development, important in this person's life. The second house, the second lord is Sun, which is exalted. So again, we have a person here with Sun in Aries. You can also see they have Rahu and Ketu in Virgo and Pisces, as it is currently. Also, Mercury and Venus are in Pisces. You have Saturn aspecting Aquarius, and you have Jupiter aspecting Aries. So you can see that this chart, especially of the three charts I'm mentioning today, is probably the closest to the current sky pattern. So that's why I brought their chart up. Besides, I thought they were an interesting person. But second house, again, you have this exalted, and also the sun has Digbala directional strength. So, super strong sun, and that super strong sun is in the 10th house of career. So this person's famous for their career. You already know that if you don't know who this person is. So, and the second house is aspected by a Swa Jupiter, which is in Mula. So again, we're about planting seeds here. It's also aspected by Mars and Rohini. So Rohini is a very like the most attractive nakshatra. It's about beauty and art and affection and maybe seduction. Um, so you have Jupiter and Mars here in the fifth house. So very strong oral communication, family as well, especially growing up. And there are some imbalances as well, or just disruptions as well. Mars being in the second house, that's going to bring like building beauty, bringing building beauty and attractiveness to things. And with Jupiter there as well, this is somebody who's going to be somebody who's very enthusiastic in their speech and probably about their causes. And since Mars is in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and societies, and Jupiter is in the 6th house of like enemies and chronic illness and that sort of thing, or, excuse me, acute illness and situations, this is potentially somebody who's very enthusiastic about talking about how to build um, better situations for society. And because Jupiter is in Mula, and Jupiter represents children, this could be somebody who's very interested in building um, uh, um, places that are more conducive and supportive and nurturing of children who are in trouble. Um, yeah. So, what did I write here? Work includes enthusiastic speech. There could also be some religious kind of connotations here because Jupiter is aspecting the second house, and Jupiter is also the lord of the ninth house of, um, government, authority, father, but also religion. And as I mentioned with Charlie Chaplin's chart, um, part of the reason why I wasn't sure if that was his real chart was because Rahu was in the ninth house, and you can see another person with Rahu in the ninth house, and this person was very religious, and actually their father was very religious as well. In Charlie Chaplin's chart, the father was a singer, but also an alcoholic and kind of all over the place. and I think also beat the kids and stuff like that. So it was pretty like, intense of a father. I don't think there was, again, I didn't read about any sort of religious influence in Charlie Chaplin's life, but again, maybe just not what I read. So, but this person's father was a Lutheran uh, preacher. So, so the father was very religious, and so I think that influenced this person. Um, yeah, and so there might be religious, again, this newfound religion and stuff like that, or charitable nature, or how do we build a better society type of speech that was coming from this person and also their family. Money was also potentially strong here. Um, because again, the Lord is Saturn and has big bala and it's exalted. Um, the third house Lord is a swa, is a debilitated Mercury, but it's, aspecting its own sign. And it's also bhanga. The debilitation is ameliorated because it's with Venus, who is exalted in the sign in which Mercury is debilitated. We also have Ketu there. Ketu is about structure, unusualness, potentially, and it's in Chitra Nakshatra, was all about structure and architecture and building things. Yeah. And because the third house is um, aspected by its own planet of Mercury with Venus, Ketu here, this is somebody who's going to be doing a lot of writing potentially. Venus is an Uttar Bhadrapada, so there can be this kind of notion of kind of art that's about, or because of this placement here, I would say it's about somebody who's like about releasing the need for potentially finer things of life and bringing about like more practical, important basics potentially. Or it could be because there's going to be two stories here because it's in Pisces. It could also be about how um, art is important in developing minds, especially minds, and even like uh, dexterity, physical skills as well as mental skills. Um, so this, when you put all this together, this is somebody who's potentially interested in writing or doing a lot of writing about developing new curriculum about practical matters. It's very detailed and it's also alternative. It's unusual, and somebody who writes a lot, actually. Um, the fifth house here, we have this Mars and Rohini aspecting its own sign. So somebody who's a very transformative thinker, an innovative advisor, and is all about, like, again, starting something that's very new and beautiful and supportive. The sixth house, we have a SWA Jupiter with Saturn, aspected by Mars. So again, it's about building construction of physical places, especially for wayward children. And also, Jupiter and Saturn are in the nakshatra Mula. Mula can also, Jupiter and Saturn can also indicate things like medicine. And Jupiter and Saturn in Mula nakshatra would give alternative medicine, like natural medicine, specifically. And actually, at this time, apparently the families in this area all were allotted a part of the forest, and they were allowed to sort of like farm the forest. And so each family kind of farmed different things, and different plants, like medicinal plants, would be farmed. So actually, each family would be kind of have their own little personal pharmacy thing that they would run, where they would make their own tinctures and stuff like that from the plants that grew from their part of the forest, and then sell them. So actually, this person, had interest in alternative medicine, which is kind of funny. But uh, what do I plan here? But there's also, like, again, there's like planting seeds of a new philosophy because you have Jupiter and Sagittarius here. This is about education. It's again also Sagittarius is the ninth house of the natural zodiac. So again, there's this religious leaning and philosophical leaning here. So new ways and methods to help children. And these natural pharmacy things. They were called Rucksack pharmacy. So Rucksack is a backpack in German. So, and also he at some point ran an orphanage. So, yeah. Um, the eighth house here, we have a swa. What did I have here? Oh, so we have Saturn and Mula aspecting Aquarius. This is somebody who's going to have a long range vision. This is like a, deeply kind of like deep within like kind of the NASA scientist, like somebody who's going to like go the distance, put all the pieces together, even if it takes like 20 years, 30 years, or whatever. That's the kind of deep psychology they have about building solid structures and supporting structures for people, and especially children. You're getting that from the chart. The ninth house I've talked about a little bit. So you have the Lord is a swa Jupiter. We have Venus there exalted, Mercury debilitated with Rahu. Um, so I put on there before I read this guy's bio that the father was probably a preacher of charity and had religious leanings, and then turns out his father was a Lutheran preacher. So also this person is going to be very interested in higher education. So he did have multiple degrees. He was interested in botany and I think gemology, like crystals, um, and education as well. So that's all there. The 10th house I already mentioned. The Lord is Mars. So again, about creating new, innovative, beautiful things. Strong sun in Ashwini. So Ashwini is going to be like a pioneer, and also kind of a rescuing type of person. Um, so this 10th house is going to be like leading and rescuing and governing. Um, yeah, because he's going to have the two leadership planets involved here, like Sun and Mars is in here, but Mars is the um, dispositor or the ruler of Aries. So it's kind of like a Martian Jupiter energy here. Sorry, Martian Sun energy here. You do also have aspect of Jupiter here as well. So again, it's about leadership and rescuing and helping and supporting children specifically. So, and he founded, among other things, he founded the German General Education Institute, which is apparently a big deal in Germany in terms of like influencing education on many levels. Then the 11th house, Mars is aspected by K2, so that's going to be pretty disruptive energy. We know about that, right? And K2's in Chitra. So this is about actually changing, shifting um, society and structures to like I can almost see like social construction and rebelliousness here. And the thing is like this guy was very important in uh, developing curriculum, especially for younger children, um, in his life. That's in the end what he ended up being famous for and important about. But the thing is, at some point, like just when his kind of philosophy about how to support children, especially in early development, started taking off, it was banned by the government for, I think, political reasons, like it usually happens, right? Um, and so for a while, he had to, like, it just got shut down. All of his stuff got shut down in Germany. And then some of his, like, students and stuff like that basically spread out to different parts of the world, mostly US, UK, and Japan, and then took his teaching philosophies and developed them there, which is where they took off. And then eventually it kind of came back to Germany. So then the 12th house, and we see that with the 12th house here. So the 12th house Lord is Mercury, which is debilitated, but bhanga. And you have aspected here by Jupiter and Saturn. So um, since he was probably running Saturn Shah period, um, from the beginning, his ideas were going to spread around the world. So if you don't know this guy, Friedrich Frobe was the inventor of kindergarten. He even came up with that term, and kindergarten literally in German means child garden. And so his philosophy about teaching children and nurturing children as they were young was like including things like art and dance and play. And he actually like, all those, I don't know, they seem like I didn't know actually somebody came up with them, but there's just kind of plain wooden building blocks, but sometimes they have different shapes and different colors, and sometimes they have letters on them and stuff like that. But they look pretty plain compared to like all the fancy digital gizmos people get now. But he actually developed teaching and nurturing toys for children to support their development. So in various aspects, like he was important in developing childhood curriculum for personal, and educational development, physical development, developing their mind, developing their, sensitivity, creativity. Like it was a very comprehensive system, apparently. So, yeah, Frederick Froebel, again, massive innovator, but in the education world and supporting young children. So that's him. So, if you do like to be your own astrologer, you can take, any of these storylines here, any of these planets, any of these houses, and kind of watch it, and take notes on, how that develops for you over the next month or so, if you kind of want to see how this plays out for you. I always tell people though, if you're going to be your own astrologer, don't freak yourself out. It's very easy for kind of newish students in astrology to do that to themselves because they know some stuff, but they don't know enough to know when something might look horrible, in your mind, but then you don't realize that other things are balancing it or other things are more important. Kind of, um, I find a lot of students don't know how to prioritize different concepts in astrology. So, anyway, don't freak yourself out. Just see what you see, learn what you learn, don't push it. Anyway, but like especially this month, we've talked a lot about Aquarius, Kumbha, Pisces, Mina, and Virgo, Tula, and Aries, Mesha because of where the planets are moving and also like the eclipse and stuff like that. So, like this chart here is just shows you where the different houses are based on a North Indian style chart. The first house is at the top, and then you go second house, you count counterclockwise. And here I have just listed the major basic kind of symbolisms of each house on the 1-7 axis, and then the 2-8 axis, and then the 3-9 axis. So, like the first house is about self, personality, health, and reputation. If you want more detail, I would definitely go to my Houses Bhavas playlist for even a lot more detail on each house. I've got all of the houses through house 7, so I've got a few more to do, but those will come through in the next few months, hopefully. Yeah, so you can take like Mars and follow that planet, or you can like Pisces, for example. Like maybe Pisces is your second house. So you can kind of see what happens with your second house, and your second house is related to family, speech, wealth, food, and drink, for example. So, especially since we're having an eclipse here, you might really see a big shift over the next month. Okay, and on the next slide, I have the other houses and basic meaning. So on this slide, I have the 4-10 axis, the 5-11 axis, and the 6-12 axis. But again, these are just, very simple short lists of symbolism of each house. So there's a lot more on the playlist if you want more. Okay, so that's April. A lot going on. So, buckle up. And, as always, the best way to deal with any of this, I know people get nervous about it with the astrology and stuff, but for all of us, like all we can really do in the end is do our best to be our best selves and keep up with our sadhana, our spiritual practice, right? And create our karma. So, as always, I appreciate you stopping by, listening to one of my talks, and all the different ways you support the channel. Sharing, liking, nice comments, and all of it. It's all appreciated. So, thank you. I do individual chart readings. I do them live on Zoom, and I also do pre-recorded video. So if any of that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic art such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care. So that's out there too, if that's interesting to you. So, as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, helpful, and useful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So until the next one, take care. Have a nice day.